All right. So there's still some seats up here in the front for those of you who are looking. So welcome to the CASR lunch. If you're paying close attention, you'll have noticed that I am not living aboard. I am Brent Nogbury, and I'm sitting in with host duties this week. So we have today our guest, Karl Olav Sandnes, who is giving a book talk. So it's going to be a little bit longer than the normal talk, so 23 minutes instead of our usual 13. And there's a handout somewhere circulating. I don't know if there's enough for all of you, so please share if you can. So the book, which appeared in the end of 2022, is that? Yeah. Is Jesus the Epic Hero, the Theology of Empress Eudokia's Homeric Gospel. And I'm just going to, as a way of introduction here, read the first sentence out of the preface, which I thought was fantastic. For some years now, I've been amused by working with the Homerocentones, the story of Jesus told in words and lines lifted from Homeric epics. So, Karl Olav, please tell us what's been so amusing.
Yeah. Well, the genre I'm talking about, Homerocentones, is actually an amusing genre. It is a genre made for amusement and entertainment. I will come back to that in a minute, but maybe I should start to say something about Evdokia. This book is not about her biography, but it's good to have some basic knowledge of who was Evdokia. He was empress in the Byzantine Empire, married to the emperor Theodosius II. She lived from 401 to 460. And she must have been a very, or an extraordinary clever person. And that may also be the reason that the emperor married her, because he needed assistance in the Christological disputes that were going on. She went on the pilgrimage to the Holy Land and was fascinated by that. When she returned to Byzance, she found out that her position at the court has been undermined due to intrigues. So she left the court and returned to the Holy Land and remained there for the rest of her life. But she remained an empress, but she never returned. And when in Jerusalem, he wrote the text that I found so amusing, the Homerocentones. Evdokia is, in my view, probably the most prolific theologian, or the prolific female theologian in the early church. And many have not even heard about her. It is also said that no other person, no other female in the ancient church, or in antiquity in general, wrote as much as she. So she is an ignored figure. What is a canto? This is a very idiosyncratic text that she produced. A canto is actually, it's a ludic or an amusing genre aimed at entertaining, and entertaining with the epic texts. And in this case, we are talking about Homer's, the Iliad, and the Odyssey. And this is maybe more a technique than actually a genre. It is about stitching together lines from different parts of these epics into making new texts, yielding a new text out of Homer's words. So you are picking lines and making a new text so that the text is still 100% Homeric, but the way the lines are organized makes it a new text. That is the canto. And this was used as, among the elite in the antiquity, they had competitions in doing this. They could use Homer, they could use Virgil, Euripides, and also other authors. Most popular was Homer. The idea was that Homer was a prophet, and that every topic could be elicited from his texts. if you only had the right method to do that. So a canto could be applied to any topic. And if Homer was a prophet and an omniscient prophet, as he was very often seen, not only by Christians, this was a general view in the antiquity, then he could also be seen as writing about Christ. So that is the starting point of Evdokia. So she is doing this text. There is a visual part in her text, and that is the Homeric text. The invisible part is the biblical part, which you have to extract somehow. And that is what organizes the story into a gospel harmony. A gospel harmony is a kind of bringing together all the four gospels into one story. And that is what I call the epic gospel, the Homeric epic gospel. Why did I write this book? There is a legacy, a critical legacy towards the cantoners in the ancient world, not only, of course, Evdokia's Homero-cantoners, but the technique of making canto in general was not always something that could be applauded. If we turn to the Christian tradition, Irenaeus and Tertullian, they used this as an illustration for how the Bible could be used or misused by heresies. Because they argued that what they considered, what they called the Gnostics, for instance, they teared the Bible apart. And the canto tradition is exactly to tear a text apart in order to make a new text. So they referred to this technique as a very bad thing to do. And they used that as a weapon, targeting the Gnostic heresies. This tradition has somehow played over also into present-day research on the canto. The first text edition by Arthur Ludwig was never finished. He gave it up. So if you look into the Teubner edition of the Homero-cantoners, you will find that it's only half finished. And in the introduction, he explains why. He finds it so boring. So he never finished it. And I think that he never understood it. Because he saw this as a way of tearing Homer apart. He read it as a Homeric text. But you have to read it as Evdokia's text. You have to read it as a new text. Even if the words are Homer's, it's a new text. And that's what I'm doing. And no one has really done that before. No theologian has worked with this text. So I used a narrative method, and I tried to find the plot in this story, and that no one have done that before. Interpreting the canto is very challenging, but also very amusing. It is kind of you can never exhaust the meaning of the text because there are so many things at play. Homer's text is at play, of course. The Bible is at play, but also liturgical traditions are at play. And one thing which is a challenge is that you never know when this text picks a line from Homer, how much of the Homeric context has to be taken into account when you are interpreting the text. That is called metalepsis, the challenge of metalepsis, the context of a citation. And this applies also to the Bible text she's using. No Bible text is quoted. You have to infer them by yourself. Not even the name of Jesus is mentioned. So you have to know the Bible in order to read this. Something about the table of the contents that you'll find on the sheet. Chapter 2, a divine plan is conceived. The Homeric epic is a two-stage story. Something goes up among the deities, and then the gods make their plans. And the next stage is that this plan is played out among human beings. So it's a two-stage story. And Evdokia also organizes her epic in the same way. It starts with Zeus. In her text, Zeus, of course, it's God. But the lines she's picking is about Zeus summoning the gods on the Olympus. And they are having a council, heavenly council, and discussing what shall we do with sinful humanity. And then a plan is conceived. And you can find some lines from that plan, a dialogue between the Father and the Son on your text. No one shall have in his mind any thought that is better than this one that I have in mind from old and even until now. For I know that the spirit in your secret heart knows ideas of kindness only. For what you think is what I think. This is the dialogue between Father and the Son. And the Father says to the Son, if you die and fulfill the destiny of your life. For those of you who know Greek, you'll be familiar with the Greek term moira, which we in Norwegian, we translate it skjebne, or the divine destiny. So the divine destiny that emerges from the council of the deities on Mount Olympus is now the divine plan of salvation for humankind. Evdokia's epic has two plots. One is homecoming, that of course derived from the Odyssey. The other is war or warfare or battle derived from the Iliad. There are many homecomings at play in this epic. Odysseus' homecoming to Ithaca is of course important. But the story of Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels is also staged as a journey narrative. So Jesus is also journeying. And in this way, he is similar to Odysseus. I have put on the sheet you have in front of you the closing of the poem, lines 23, 43, and 23, 44. This is how the poem is closed. He started to run and reached his dear father very quickly and sat back down again on the throne from which he stood up. In the context of the Odyssey, this refers to Telemachos when he returns home and reunites with his father. As I read this poem, this is a Homeric way of reading Psalm 110, where it says that Christ was seated at the right-hand side of the Father. So this is where the text closes. So now Jesus is in the role of Telemachos. Another aspect of homecoming, which is important in this story, are the healing story. All healing stories in this poem are homecoming stories. And that may appear surprising to us because they are never staged in the New Testament as homecoming stories. Because the people Jesus helps or meets in these healing stories, they are never portrayed as foreigners. But that is a consistent aspect in this text. I have given some lines from the story of the paralyzed man, 672 to 674. So home to your dear fatherland you will return, even though you have suffered much. Rise up, crooked foot, my child. It took me some time to figure out why these healing stories had become homecoming stories. And I think I found the answer. In so many of the healing stories, Jesus says at the end, go home. Take your mat and go home. And for a creative mind like Evdokia, this was a starting point for developing the Johannine sign tradition some steps further. So the healing stories became homecoming stories. And this also links up with the next lines you have in front of you about the crowd leaving Hades. There again, you have a homecoming motive at play. Come quickly, I will guide the way. There are my father's estate and fruitful vineyard. So he said and led the way, and they followed him. These lines are maybe the most important lines in the epic. They depict Christ in Hades. And this poem is heavily indebted to the Gospel of Nicodemus. The Gospel of Nicodemus is as a written text later, but the traditions that are found in the Gospel of Nicodemus, I think they can date back to the 2nd or 3rd century. And the Gospel of Nicodemus is about Jesus visiting Hades and actually being victorious there. Death is conquered by Jesus. And Jesus empties Hades according to these traditions. And that is what this text is about. Jesus empties Hades and brings all the dead out and brings them home. So again, the homecoming is here very important. It is therefore, if you follow the tradition of the Gospel of Nicodemus, as Evdokia does, it follows almost as a necessity that you think in terms of universal salvation, apokatastasis. Everyone will be saved at the end. This is an important aspect in this text. And this brings me to the other plot, warfare. 5 minutes left, which is taken from the plot of the Iliad, where Jesus is fighting Hades, and you have that in front of you. Aidoneus, king of the dead below, was terrified, and in fear he leaped from his throne and cried out aloud, "Oh me!" He quickly opened the gates and pushed back the bars. These are the gates of Hades that are opened. Then came, like the leaves and flowers in their season, out of Erebus, the souls of those that are dead. So Jesus is fighting Hades in order to bring the dead back home. If you look at the lines you have now in front of you from 1986, 1987, I will comment on that only. Line 1987 is Priam, the king of Troy, when he is a classic scene in the Iliad, when he is approaching the camp of his enemy. Achilles has killed his son Hector, and he is pleading his enemy for the body of his son. The gates to Achilles' camp becomes, in this text of Evdokia, the gates to Hades. While Priam pleads the victor, Jesus arrives victorious and conquers. This is a good example how transvaluation goes on in this text. It's not only a matter of citing Homer, but there is always kind of a transvaluation or transformation going on. A final word on the gender perspective. There is an important gender perspective in this book. How is it possible for a woman like Evdokia to preach? Because her text is certainly preaching. I think the way to explain that is that she preaches through the words of Homer. And since she preaches through the words of Homer, she is able to preach. And it's interesting that we have another quite famous canto as well, not a Homeric canto, but the Virgil canto by Proba, a Roman senatorial wife. She wrote a similar text, but she wrote it as stories to be read aloud for her son when the son was going to sleep. So the context is domestic. It's good night or good night stories. That's not the case with Evdokia at all. She is proclaiming, but he uses the word of another to do that. I think that's